nonprofit lens. We're a proud partner of ACC TV, but given COVID-19, we're going virtual for this, our fourth season. Our center is fully committed to being an anti-racist organization, to accelerating our own personal learning journeys, confronting our biases and blind spots, and creating opportunities for others to do the same. This episode is part of our series on the Hispanic Latinx experience in Austin, which is part of a larger series on peoples of color's experience in Austin. You can watch our series on the Black experience in Austin on our website, www.nonprofitaustin.com/civil-society. Coming up in the new year, we will be exploring the Asian Pacific Islander experience and then the Indigenous North American Native and Indigenous peoples experiences in Austin. As we said in our public statement on racial equity, we're moved by a new sense of urgency to heighten our community's consciousness of institutional racism and systemic impediments to racial equity, and to aggressively progress on the continuum to racial equity to fulfill America's promise to all of its inhabitants. This show is part of that effort. My guest today is Rosamaria Murillo. She is the Chief Executive Officer of Buen Samaritano and has been in that position since July of 2019. For more than 25 years, Rosamaria has led different systems to develop, implement, and strengthen services for underserved communities. She's a recognized public health advocate with extensive experience in public policy, higher education, nonprofit, and government management. She holds a PhD in leadership studies from the School of Business at Our Lady of the Lake, a Master of Social Work degree from Our Lady of the Lake University, and a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology from the University of Texas at Austin. Rosamaria has served as a lecturer at the University of Texas at Austin, at the University of Texas at San Antonio, and Texas State, where she taught graduate and undergraduate courses focusing on social justice, policy, nonprofit management, program development, organizational leadership, public administration, and child welfare. Rosamaria, it's a pleasure, a real pleasure to have you on the episode today, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So before we launch into questions about what it's like being an executive director and Buen Samaritano, tell us a little about Rosamaria Murillo. Why are you doing the work you're doing? What led you to this work?
I love a little about Rosamaria. I thought a lot about this question, and this is going to be my quick answer. Rosamaria is a courageous, resilient, optimistic, and person driven to serve. I absolutely believe in giving back and in continuing the path of connection, inclusion, and equity that other people pave for me so that I could have the honor to sit here with you and have this discussion. So I can have the honor of continuing to serve and strengthen community. That is a little bit about me.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Juarez, El Paso. Did not come to the United States until I was a little bit older. And so had the experience of not knowing that I was a Latina, not knowing that I was living in poverty, right? That was not my identity. I was moving along until I got here to the United States. And that's when I realized everything told me that I was the other, right? So I want to, back to your question, what I like to share with you is what it was like for me to grow up in Juarez, El Paso. As I said earlier, I had no awareness that I was a young Latina living in severe poverty. because I lived with loving, hardworking parents. You know, my first awareness about my identity and how others saw me was when we moved to the U.S. In El Paso. We lived in, first of all, in El Paso, homes have basements, so we moved to a basement. Then we lived in government housing, spoke no English, paid for food with food stamps, became first generation college graduate. And then the next place where I became even more aware of my identity and how others saw me was when I came to the University of Texas. And people were constantly asking me, well, what are you? Are you Latina? Are you Italian? Are you Greek? You don't sound like us. Who are you? What are you? So it was this need from people to understand my identity. Which was a really interesting experience. It's like, why is it important for you to understand my identity? Right?
Mhm.
I still ask that that question. So yeah, I grew up in Juarez, El Paso, and came to Austin. Feels like 100 years ago now to go to the University of Texas.
So so as you grew up, um, you didn't experience necessarily, probably until you got to El Paso, any of the potential prejudice and so forth.
That's right. It's an interesting experience, right?
Yeah.
That and then along with that, I could not. So when we talk about the Latino experience, it's really challenging to talk about that, right? Because Latinos are so diverse.
Right.
We are diverse in color. We are diverse in economics. We are diverse in education. All over Latino America, but also in the United States. There's so much diversity, and then also by region. So it's really difficult to say, well, this is the Latino experience. So as you hear me today, I'm going to be sharing my experience as a woman of color. That might be different, right, from another Latina.
Absolutely. So what drove you to move forward in your career, in your education, to get a doctorate?
Several things. I grew up in a family where my parents believed that education was the way out of poverty. And it's kind of interesting because I didn't know I was living in poverty. Right? So my parents stressed the importance of education. And so, I'm going to try to make a long story short. When we came to the United States, both of my parents had done no more than sixth grade education, did not speak English, so they were adamant about us getting a good education. And so my father, when I was about to come to the University of Texas, my father passed away. And I told my mother, look, I'll stay here with you and help you because there's 8 of us in my family. And she said, no, I can't take care of you here, but if you stay here, you're never leaving. So here's $100 in food stamps and $25 for you to get a ride from the airport, back when the airport was in Mueller. Here's $25 cash. And so the support and the motivation and the belief from my parents that education was important drove me to UT. As I was developing myself in the academic world and also going into a professional world, I saw that I needed to advance my education and my development in order to have a seat at the table.
Yep.
And so that's why I decided to go on and get a master. But even then, as a Latina, as my experience, even with a master's, I would get so far. And then I had I've always enjoyed teaching, but I knew that in order for me to be competitive at a university level, I had to have a doctorate. There are very few Latinas in general at university levels. And so in order to get there, I decided that a PhD would be a strong credential for me to have. So that's a short path to my
Interesting.
academic experience.
So the organization you're now leading, Buen Samaritano, is an outreach ministry of the Episcopal Diocese of Texas. And it's described on the website as a one-stop shop to address the needs of Latino and Spanish-speaking community in Travis County and surrounding areas. Talk a little bit about the work of El Buen and how, as your website says, you're committed to recognize the dignity of all by ensuring access to healthcare, education, essential needs that lead to healthy, productive, and secure lives.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Two things. I can talk about the programs we do, right? We do workforce development program focusing on adults, especially English as a second language. We provide youth services, both after school and summer camps. We also have health literacy and access to health services. We have the clinic on site and connect patients to healthcare. We also have a food pantry. And during this COVID period, we also have engaged in providing access to cash. I will come back to cash. I will come back to those services. But I want to talk also about the principles for us. We believe in being a resource, a bridge to resources, right? So we might not be experts at everything, but we know who can be. And so we are committed to connecting people to those services, and also to partnering with organizations, especially right now. The other thing that's important for us is to focus on undoing, or I should say, creating systems of equity. That's extremely important for us. And what that means for us as an organization, as a social justice organization, is that we must be willing to engage in very difficult conversations about systems level change, right? Because we have created a system that uses a charity lens to serve community rather than a social justice lens. And then the other part about us is that we hold ourselves accountable. So it's a lot easier to say that the system is not working. It's a lot more challenging to create a new system that works. So when you ask me about how we are a one-stop shop, it's a complex question. We are a one-stop shop because we connect people to services that we don't provide directly, but we're also bridge builders. We're also in the space of creating systems change so that people don't have to be hunting around and looking where they're going to be able to provide or get services.
Yep. I appreciate you talking about the principles. I love that phrase, a bridge to resources. It really speaks a great deal about what your organizational philosophy is.
Right now in this, this is the way that we are committed to working, pandemic or no pandemic. But right now, for us as an organization to thrive and to be relevant and to be there for people, we must be willing to collaborate, to connect, to be a bridge with organizations. And in Austin, there are many nonprofits that often have worked in silos, and that right now we cannot afford to work in silos in order to serve community.
So how has COVID affected your agency? And it affected your outreach and and what strategies are you using to offset its challenges and negative impact?
Yeah, so it's when like most organizations in Austin, it was an organization that was used to doing in-person services, right? And then along comes COVID. I'm going to give you three numbers to speak about pantry. 2 days, 3 times, 20,000 people. Back in March, when the city of Austin closed, El Buen Samaritano had 2 days to become one of the leading emergency response nonprofit organizations in Austin, with a team that had no experience at all doing emergency response. So in 2 days, we brought a small team of the people that could actually work to prepare for what was coming. And in 2 days, we turned our in-person pantry into a drive-through pantry that to this day is serving 3 times its capacity. By the end of this year, we will have had more than 20,000 food pantry visits at El Buen Samaritano. That's more than we would serve in 3 years, right? So El Buen became an organization in order to be relevant and to serve community that we became an organization that needed to be flexible and to understand what it takes to do an emergency response under this pandemic. We also added a component of home delivery that we're not doing it ourselves. We partner with organizations to do that. So we secure the food, and our partner organizations come to El Buen, pick up the food boxes, and they take it to their families. So through that partnership, at some point we were reaching an additional 400 families. Right now it's between 200 to 300. So we changed the way that we served in just 2 days. In just two days. Through that pantry. We also had the opportunity, we were asked by the city of Austin if we were interested in providing access to cash for the community. And never mind that when at the time we were dealing with, becoming a drive-through pantry and pausing our in-person services and pivoting to online. And along comes the city and says, hey, can you help us distribute cash to families? What was I to say? No. So I said, yes, we will help you. And we had we're an organization blessed with great technology, but we had never done cash distribution to that level. And so we said no. We learned lots of lessons from that experience, but that experience allowed us now to have built an infrastructure that includes a workforce, culturally competent, bilingual workforce, technology, and data. Through that system, we're able to scale up and scale down our ability to provide access to cash, to assist people with accessing other resources like rent, and then also to connect people to services. So in many ways, COVID pushed and went to its next level of excellence and an ability to serve community.
So you guys actually, you did a great job in meeting the challenge.
We were courageous. We were courageous in doing that. We had no other option, right? Yeah. What do? Close shop. The other piece that we did was we pivoted to online services, and it gave us an opportunity. And we were lucky that, I'm lucky that on my team, I had some amazing young folks that knew a lot about technology and created an online youth programming that allowed us to serve youth during the summer, including STEM curriculums, having a heavy technology component, having a component where we're engaging with parents as well, finding out what's going on, what do you need, how can we help you? And then the other piece is that we set out to look for funding that would allow us to narrow the digital divide. Now we can have all the online services we want. If people don't have a computer or internet, they can't engage with us. So we were fortunate to be able to find those resources and provide those resources to our families that we were serving.
Which is an interesting segue, because your website says that 87% of your clients have an income of less than $24,000 for a family of two. And I'm assuming there's a lot of families more than two. So from your vantage point, if you will, what are the top two, just for the purpose of time, what are the greatest challenges that your clients, your consumers, are facing, especially during COVID?
Yeah, and by the way, those statistics still hold. And during COVID, we get to see people that had never even thought about going to a pantry to get food, right? We get to see people that come with, that are at would have never thought, students as well. So two of the top challenges that we see is, of course, economic challenge. People have lost their jobs or do not qualify. 90% of the people that we were serving through the drive-through pantry did not qualify for the federal stimulus check, right? The other challenge that we see is isolation, right? So they're home, they're isolated physically, they are isolated by technology. They're not able to connect with what is available because there's no technology. So those two things create tremendous stress in the families that we're serving, right? All of a sudden you have moms and dads that were working maybe 2-3 jobs to survive, and now they don't have a job, but their child is at home and has to go to school online, and they don't have the technology or the resources to help them. Even when AISD and other ISDs provide technology, it's still challenging for families because there's the issues of connectivity. Well, how can I help my child connect? So I would say economic challenges and isolation. I could talk a whole hour around mental health issues, right? And the challenges that the caretakers and the parents are having as they're dealing with losing their job and being present for the child that still has to be going to school.
Extreme stress.
And then there's categories as well, right? So older adults also having challenges connecting and being able to access services. Right now, we're very fortunate to be able to provide meals for older adults as well as part of our pantry. That's a specialized service that we're providing, and also meals for AISD students.
So in your position, you're the recipient, the receiver, the whatever of all this need out there and all this, well, to some extent, injustice. How do you deal with the frustration of seeing all this, wanting to make changes, wanting to help, and yet, obviously, as we all do, have very limited resources? There's so much pain out there that you can't fully ameliorate it.
How do I deal with it?
How do you deal with it?
I love that question. And I'm just going to start by saying, I don't believe there is scarcity of resources. I know there is no scarcity of resources. In this amazing country, resources abound. We're one of the wealthiest nations in the world, and we live in Austin, and look around the wealth in Austin. So there is no I challenge the perception or the thinking that there is scarcity of or limited resources. What I believe is that rather than, that there is a limit as to what we as a nation and as a system are willing to do to redistribute that wealth in a more equitable manner, right? And we can talk about for another hour on that piece. So for me, I focus on that. I focus on the fact that there are resources, and as a leader, I am going to find those resources. And resources are about money, are about people, are about technology, and are about bringing organizations together, right? So all that resource that we have in this community, I am focused on bringing together to serve families right now that are facing unbelievable challenges, unimaginable experiences. I could tell you that there are times when I get sad, when I have frustration, when I have like a feeling of being overwhelmed, and then I can also tell you that for me, my focus is on going after the resources that I know are out there to serve community.
Good perspective. So there have been some complaints from or concerns expressed by Latino-led organizations serving Latino populations that in the current situation, that insufficient resources are being made available to those organizations, that there's some perhaps prejudice in the distribution of funds and resources. Do you face that at El Buen? Do you have any thoughts on that? Heavy sigh.
That's a heavy question, right? I can answer it from all kinds of perspectives, right? I've been in positions of making decisions about funding, and you know how funding works in our system, right? You compete for funding. So whoever has the best resources to compete for funding that organization is going to be the one that gets the funding, right? So systems set it up so that organizations with the least resources to pay somebody that's a great grant writer, right, cannot compete. You got to have people that understand how to write proposals if you're going to compete in the current system, right? So I don't mean to blame the victim here. So in terms of the complaint about, I guess, minority organizations not receiving resources, you see it, right? You see it in the pattern of how or what organizations are funded. And usually the organizations that end up being funded are those that can afford in this system to compete. Oftentimes, minority serving organizations are at the ground level, right? Where the rubber hits the road. They're busy saving people from the river.
Yep.
And they're not busy figuring out how they're gonna go out and get somebody that can help them write a grant so that they can compete in a system that is meant to make them fail. Right? I'm giving you no answer, but just giving you my.
I think you're giving me a full answer in terms of the system is set up in a way. The system is the way we do things is set up in a way that is prejudicial to those who don't have the resources to play the system.
To play in the game, right? In the game of competition, because that's what it is. It is a game of competition. As a leader of organizations and systems, I had to learn how that system plays, not because I love it, but because I knew my organization depended on that skill, right?
Yep.
I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying I had to learn that system to play in it. And it's a balancing act, right? Of learning to play in the system and then challenging the system to like, hey, this is not equitable. This is not working. But by the way, I need funds so that I can go and feed,
Yeah.
for the next 3 months, an additional 10,000 families.
Yeah.
And so it's a balancing act. I do think that sometimes the system creates what creates these silos and competitions where you see so many nonprofits, right? That you begin to wonder, why are there so many nonprofits and we're still having so much disparity in health outcomes in social services, right? Is it the fault of the nonprofits, or is it the fault, or who's accountable here for that?
Yeah. Are you hope? I think you probably can tell me yes, but I'm assuming you're hopeful that that the system will change at some point, that the way we do these things, particularly given the focus that we now have, not just on the pandemic, but on the inequalities in our society. Are you hopeful that this will change? And give me the date when you think it's going to change.
Oh man, that's I'm going to tell you the date. I might not live to see that date, but I will work till my last breath so that date comes for others behind me, right? But I am an optimist. I do believe that that the system will change. And it doesn't happen overnight, and it goes up and down, right? Once you start seeing some change, then something drops, and then you have to keep going and keep fighting so that system changes. We are a nation that uses an individualistic framework to live our lives. And until that starts to turn a little bit, that system won't change. We live in a framework where you pull yourself up from your bootstraps, right? And that's a framework that blames people that don't have boots to begin with.
Excellent point.
And as the makeup of our nation, our amazing nation, changes, I have hope that then that individualistic framework starts to make more room for a more cooperative society. And that's why I'm telling you, I'm not going to be around to see that, but I will work towards that.
Fantastic answer. One of our viewers just said, and I don't know if you're following the chat or not, you're a treasure, Rosamaria. Thank you for sharing with us.
Oh, who said that?
I don't know, but I would turn her in and I'd ask her for a contribution.
Oh, yeah, Marsha. Yeah. Hi, Marsha.
So, as an outreach ministry of the Episcopal Diocese of
Hi, Rosamaria.
Hi.
As an outreach ministry of the Episcopal Diocese of Texas, how does faith play itself out in your organization?
Well, I'll start by saying we welcome all faiths, right? And we are guided by faith and hope. And so spirituality and being able to be in tune with the spiritual connection with human being is important for us in whatever way they choose to worship. It plays out for us in that we are connected to our brothers and sisters, and whatever faith they have, we're connected. We're connected by a God that we all believe in. our goal, at least my goal as the leader of a faith-based organization, is not to convince you of what faith you should be, but rather to live in the principle of loving our neighbors and our brothers and sisters, and holding hands and being a net for those that oftentimes will not have a net.
Yeah. Okay, let's come back to Rosamaria, okay? Because you're fascinating. All right.
As well?
So, knowing what you know today, being where you are today, having achieved the successes and absorbed the challenges that you probably have had, what would you say to your younger self who has just come to the United States, okay, just moved to El Paso, is probably a little confused, by the change in culture, discovering that you are poor and you didn't realize that before, as you said before. What would you say to yourself? What do you wish you would have known then that you know now that would have helped you along your journey?
I say to that young girl what I say to myself now: be courageous. Be courageous. Jump. Go. Be courageous. And I repeat that because I also, when I talk about me being courageous now, in retrospect, I see how courageous that little girl was.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, she had no idea that all the odds were against her. I'll talk about myself in the third person, right? She had no idea. And even as she realized that the odds were against her, she was courageous. And she dared. And so what I do now with the people that we serve, especially young people, is figure out how we can bring out that courage, right? That courage. And in order for young people to feel that courage, they need to have a sense that somebody's going to be there to hold them as they fall. I would be even more courageous in standing up for what I am willing to lose my job about, what I am willing to fail for, what I am willing to be humiliated about. That's what I would tell that young girl who was courageous. I would tell her to take it to the next level. Because life is short. Sorry, I'm getting emotional here.
Oh, no, I think that's those are basic values and principles that I think are absolutely essential, both for leadership and success in general. And in the position you're in of what you need to do day in and day out, I mean, courage is fundamental to be successful.
It is. It is. And as I reflect in your question, I not only would say that to my younger self, I remind myself of that now, right? Because I speak for myself, as I get older, the risks are higher, the losses are greater, right? And so am I willing to do that? And the answer has got to be, for me, yes.
Superb.
Yes.
So and this may be a little redundant, but what would you say what do you say besides the being courageous, to the young people you come across who see you as a role model, and what do you say to them about lessons learned, hard-earned wisdom, that you've achieved?
Yeah. What's your dream?
Mm-hmm.
And how let's talk about your dream. And let's talk about the many ways that you can get towards that. You can go towards your dream. What sparks your passion? What makes you come to light? I would ask lots of questions because it's important for me to know what lights that young person's fire, and to figure out how we connect that person into that path. If that means, hey, you need to have education about not getting pregnant so early, right? Hey, you need education, you need information about how to take the SAT, because man, you gotta have the SAT if you want to compete, or if if you don't have the SAT, what options do you have to go to college? I would do what somebody did to me when I was growing up. Nobody told me I needed to take the SAT in high school. So here I am as a senior applying to a university, and I'm sure the university laughing at me because I didn't even have an SAT score. And there was an angel from a community college that said, you can still achieve that dream. Let me show you how. And that person registered me for to start community college while I was still a senior in high school. This was 100 years ago. So back to your question, at least, right? So back to your question is, I would ask with, what's your dream? And I would provide whatever information they need to have, and get them connected to resources. Oftentimes the youth that we have, like my experience, don't have parents that understand what it takes, what you need to do in high school to even go on to the next level, whether it's a technical career, a 2-year college, or a 4-year institution. So important to know what that young person is dreaming about and what they know and don't know.
And obviously implicit in that is reaffirming the fact that they have the right and to dream.
That's correct. And that this nation is depending on them, that this nation values them, that this nation, if it's going to continue to be the most amazing nation in the world, must do something about the way that we work with young people of color, with young Black and brown kids, with young white kids that are living in poverty. What are we doing with these young people so that they can continue to contribute to our nation?
So who have been your mentors? You mentioned somebody from a community college, Yale community colleges, yeah. But who have been your mentors? Who have been the people that influence you to develop the kind of courage, forthrightness, fighting spirit that comes across so heavily?
Of course, I start with my parents. I start with my parents, who had a fighting spirit, so that their family could have a better future. But definitely my mother. I don't know if you can see my mother. I have her right in the back of me. My mother did not know English, did not know how to drive, had never worked outside the home. And so when my father died, she had to figure that out. And by the way, another point for community college, my mother went to pick up, she would go to the New Mexico fields for cotton and chile. That didn't work because she had kids at home. She cleaned hotels. That didn't work. She decided she was going to go learn English, and she went to a community college in El Paso to learn English. And she said, you know what, I can have a work study. And so while she was learning English, she also got a work study at that community college. And all my brothers and sisters would come over to the library where she was working as a work study until she was done. And at the end of every night, all of them would go back home. And she did that until the last one graduated from school. And in that process, she also became a teacher. So she's my greatest role model and mentor. And also, in my career, my mentors have always been people that pulled me up with them. right? Like, in my early career, I had absolutely no experience running multi-million projects. And Dr. Gomez, my research professor running an FQHC in San Antonio, said, "Hey, you want to come over and run this healthcare for the homeless program? We just got like $2 million to integrate men's homeless men and women and children's together. You want to do it?" I had no idea how to do it. I said yes. And I've always had somebody that has given me an opportunity. They probably knew I had no experience, but they knew I was hungry enough and courageous enough to do it, that they have brought me up. So, Dr. Gomez, Del Garcia, who is with the Migrant Clinicians Network and at the time was working with Planned Parenthood. I had no idea how to implement one of the first HIV prevention programs in women's healthcare family planning clinic. And she said, "You want to do it?" And I said, "Of course." So on the line, there has always been leaders that had seen potential in me. And those leaders have been my role models and teachers.
Well, they certainly were right, and I think they achieved what they were seeking to do. So I thank you. This
Oh,
has been a wonderful conversation, and I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us. I'm looking forward to your working more closely with our center, as we've discussed, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I have enjoyed it.
So
I
thank
didn't
you,
keep,
Rosemary. So thank you all for watching Civil Society. And thank you, as always, to Kate Tolliver, our managing producer, for working behind the scenes to make sure everything runs smoothly. You can read more about Rosamaria Murillo and Buen Samaritano on our website and the issues we just discussed. And you can view future and previous episodes of Civil Society at nonprofitaustin.org/civil-society. And you can watch us on ACC TV as well. Again, thank you, Rosamaria, and thank you all for participating and watching this episode.